showing up to this initial session of the fall webinar series. I'm Tim Goff, the CEO founder of My Ground Force, and I'll be your host for these next 7 sessions. We may add an 8th one along the way. Today, we're going to do what we did in the second session of the spring webinar series, which was quite the hit. We're going to talk about the contract. And, the reason we did that in the spring series is, for the most part, every time I ask the question, 80% of contractors have not read the contract. And I've been on that rant now for several months, and hopefully I've inspired some folks to read the contract. It's really your only weapon in conversations with FedEx. And I found it to be extremely advantageous to be in-depth knowledgeable on the contract. And the only one I know that knows the contract better than me is Alex. And Alex uses that contract extremely effectively in his conversations with FedEx, both in public and private. And so he did an amazing job back in the fall. We're not going to repeat all of that because that was 90 minutes and most of that still applies. So what we're going to talk about today is what has changed in the new contract. And I'm just calling it the 2025 TSPA. And there are some substantive changes. If you recall the series back in the spring, I predicted that there would be some substantive changes in the new contract. They didn't go as far as I thought they might in some regards, but they did make some changes that are, and there's reasons for it, and Alex is going to go into it in depth. I have predicted, and you start to see it in this contract, that the requirements to comply with the contract are going to get more difficult, and the penalties for not being compliant are going to get more intense. And you're starting to see that in this contract. So as you know, I'm a co-founder of the Line Haul Summit. The other co-founder is Alex Frum. We brainstormed that in Nashville back in 2020 and 2021 actually. And, even though I said this before, even though Alex is a West Point grad, he's pretty gosh damn smart. And I'm really happy that I'm his friend and he's my friend, and that his daughter's going to Navy next year to superstar in track. So you can tell that he is a very intelligent guy, and he's passing that down in the future generations of the Frum family. So we're going to do what we've done in the past. I'm going to turn this over to Alex. He's got a bunch of slides here, 20 or so. We'll go 30, 40 minutes and cover these slides, and Alex will go in detail focused on the changes, not the basic contract, but the changes to the existing contract. And then we'll have time at the end for some questions. So get your questions ready, and I welcome aboard Alex Frum. Alex, you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we get started, I think it's really important for both Tim and I to say that the contract and what we're going to be talking about, this is our opinion. This is no way and shape aligned with, or we don't speak on behalf of FedEx or Federal Express Corporation. This is just the opinion of myself as a contractor. I happen to be the owner of Alpha Kilo Logistics. And, my conversations with Tim Goff as the CEO and owner of My Ground Force. But what we're doing is that, we've taken the opportunity to read the contract. And I'm just one of those gluttons for punishment. When I was growing up, I used to put myself to bed reading VCR manuals. And now I put myself to bed reading the TSPA. But what I make as a habit of myself is to, one, attend multiple forums. So I have the opportunity to hear the interpretation of the changes that's going to occur from different line haul senior managers or from different BDS representatives. But also as I read the contract and digest it, I get the opportunities multiple times to ask questions of FedEx and get clarification on this. And so what I've done is I go through, I print everything out, and I take a highlighter and I'll highlight passages that are interesting to me, or things that I've noticed that are changes, and then I'll refer that back to previous contracts. And I read every single page of every single of the TSPA and of every single schedule. So and these are the areas that I think are important that contractors should be aware of and understand that these are changes or just re-highlighting things for contractors to be aware of. And why is this important? And this is something I say to contractors on a regular basis. On a daily basis, we as TSPs interact with dispatchers. Either you as an owner or one of your BCs is interacting with that dispatcher. And it's your responsibility to know the contract, because otherwise you're subject to the whims of an employee who works a 8-hour day or maybe a 9-hour day, makes about somewhere between $25 and $30 an hour. And their goal is just to hit the easy button as often as possible and go home. So it's your responsibility to understand the contract and to protect yourself, because that dispatcher doesn't read the contract. That planner doesn't read the contract. That line haul manager is starting to read the contract. The only in that building, terminal that actually understands and read the contract, your senior line manager. It's really important that you know the contract so that you can defend yourself, make the right business decisions for yourself. So let's talk about the contract this year. In general, I thought the contract this year was really fair. There was only a couple areas that I was concerned of. But what I wanted to re-highlight at the start is that if you're not aware, a group of DSP employees, which are, I don't actually know what DSPs are. I think it's Delivery Partners, which is an Amazon acronym for their contractors, sued and won a judgment in the Labor Relations Board that Amazon has to now go to court with Amazon DSP employees regarding their status. Are they employees of the DSPs, or are they the employees of Amazon itself? And this is something that we need to be aware of, because it will have implications on our businesses, just like the UPS contract had implications on our business last year. So in light of that, remember, as a TSP, you are responsible and you maintain full discretion for your routes traveled, the equipment type and quantity, your staffing and personnel decisions. You are required to hire, train, discipline, and or terminate your own personnel. FedEx cannot require you to do any of that. It's your responsibility to set compensation schedules and other employment terms. And it's your responsibility to supervise the methods or means used by TSP personnel to achieve contracted results. You are responsible for wages, salaries, benefits. You are responsible for employee taxes, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, and you're responsible for compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local laws. Why do I say this? Is again, because at the end of the day, we are contractors. We sign a transportation service provider agreement, and every single one of our employees is a W-2 employee of ours and not a FedEx. So FedEx is going to come back to you over and over again on this. Just last week, I had an argument with the senior line haul manager about something that he wanted me to do. And he's like, and his response back to me was, look, I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. I'm not going to tell you how to staff your business. I'm just going to tell you that this is what my expectations are. And my argument back with him was that he was asking me to do something that was skirting was potentially an hours of service violation. And he responded back to me, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just telling you that this is what my expectations are. It's up to you to determine how you solve that problem and achieve the results that I'm expecting out of you.
If I could just jump in here. Whenever you have that kind of encounter, and Alex and I have discussed this encounter that he had, what I've always done to senior manager, and they say things like they said to Alex, I said, can you please send that to me in an email? And I promise you, if they think for 1 second that it's skirting the contract, they will not put it in writing. And so this is how you can use the contract. And Alex is demonstrating this for you. How, if you know the contract, you can stand up for yourself and leverage the contract in your favor. It's the only weapon you have. And then accountability to the FedEx employee adhering to the contract by putting those things in writing is the other way that you can leverage what little capability you have under this contract. Thanks, Alex.
Next slide, Allie. So I'm going to refer to things in the contract by either TSPA, Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule C, and then I'm going to quote to you the actual paragraph. So paragraph 6, section or part 4, subsection A. So for example, key change, the FedEx is going to enhance the enforcement ability of key terms in the contract. Okay, so what does this mean? This allows FedEx to terminate the contract in very, very specific instances. And this is in response to the contract being a little bit generalized and opaque. And they want to make sure that you understand that in these specific situations, the FedEx has the ability to terminate your contract. So in TSPA section 6.4A, TSPA now agrees not to assign any personnel who cause a breach of section 3.4B or C, including without limitation by making a false certification of facts, such as forging a recipient's signature as proof of delivery or conveying false shipment tracking information. So this is specifically oriented towards P&D delivery. So saying that you cannot sign like those little Palm Pilots that they walk around with and say that you acknowledge you received a package, but it also refers to anybody that does spots. So sometimes in spot, you're going to be required to get a signature proving that you delivered and that the customer acknowledges receipt of a trailer, or you might need to get dispatched from a customer back to a hub, and you might need to get you might need to certify that you saw that all the items were packed and delivered into the trailer and that they were secured, and then they sealed the trailer. So understand that this is a requirement. If you have an employee who forges or for any reason is using negligent or malfeasance in their execution of this responsibility, FedEx is going to come after you. So it's really important that you train your employees on what FedEx is expecting, and you make sure that they understand the severity of the situation. So the next slide, please. Okay, so TSA clearance and identification. Okay, this is really important because as we move forward in One FedEx, and as line starts taking over responsibilities from FedEx Express, we are going to be responsible for providing drivers that have TSA clearance. Okay, so they are changing the TSPA to ensure access necessary for customer service. So we are now agreeing that our personnel will wear and display an ID badge provided by Federal Express Corporation, and that any ID and identification badges provided to us will be returned to Federal Express Corporation when they're no longer providing services in agreement. Okay, so specifically, there are going to be customers that when we operate on their facilities, when we go pick up packages or when we go pick up trailers or when we deliver trailers, we are going to need to display our ID badge. We do not have a requirement to wear uniforms like the P&D contractors, but we are going to be required to have an ID badge. Already in the contract, it says that we cannot enter and exit a facility, even if we're in our trucks, without an ID badge. But this is taking it another step further, saying that you have to have that ID badge when you go into a customer site, and that ID badge is an important piece of a control matter, and that you need to turn it in and collect it when a driver quits. Mileage and reporting requirements. Ali, can you move to slide 10? Okay, so this is just a changing of the language here, requiring to clarify that TSPs are required to track our individual vehicle mileage reports on a daily basis and submit them to FedEx on a weekly basis. Additionally, so this is pretty much everybody already does this, but this is just clarifying in the contract because it didn't necessarily say that we had to track our mileage on a daily basis and submit it on a weekly basis. But this is just clarifying that. But what it's also doing is that it's giving FedEx the ability in section 8.9 that they'll have the ability eventually to potentially collect this information on their own through the LLDs, and we will no longer have to submit IVRs to FedEx. Why is this important? Because under the Drive initiative, FedEx is looking for ways to save costs. Okay. Many of you might not be aware of, but what happens right now is that we submit an IVMR to FedEx on a weekly basis. FedEx actually then prints that out. So from all 1,700 contractors, they print out 17,000 tractor IVMRs on a weekly basis, and then they annually input them into another system. So if you think about it, there's room for a lot of error there. And that's one reason why there's a lot of problems with your IFTAs, and why you need to keep track of your IFTAs and make sure that FedEx is not making any inputting errors. So if they were able to switch to a new system where they collect the information directly from the ELD providers, then this would alleviate the need to print out those documents and then input them into another system. So you save on paper and on time, but potentially you could actually reduce headcount by getting rid of that one employee whose job is to print out IVMRs and MMRs and type them in and put them into another system. So this is a way for FedEx eventually to save money on the Drive initiative.
So Alex, I actually had this conversation in Pittsburgh with FedEx last year and showed them how I could automate that process. During that effort, I estimate that they spent somewhere between $30 and $40 million a year typing in documents into their system. Now, you make the comment that did you get information from FedEx that this is what they're planning to do, or is that your assessment of what this would enable them to do?
FedEx has said multiple times to me in different formats and in different settings that they're looking for ways that they can streamline. So if you go to the next page, Ali, the one with the upcoming changes and their effects, slide 12. So back one page. Slide 12. Yes. So this will allow FedEx to improve accuracy and ensures precise tracking of mileage, aligns with regulatory requirements, and future integration with the ELT provider. So these are all things that are coming out of conversations I've had either with Paul or Jeff or John Lisney or Mike Tiefenthaler about these specific initiatives that they're looking to achieve through the Drive initiative. So how are they going to do this? I don't know. You know, maybe they subcontract with you. Maybe they get with another third-party vendor and say, hey, can you build me a mousetrap that can do this system better? I know that they are investing in third-party software providers to try to develop new tools to integrate systems better with TMS and CMS and CDAS, since those are all legacy systems that actually don't talk to each other right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's why I was asking. It's so it's not just your idea that this could enable that. This is actually something that you've heard them mention. And the reason I ask that is just so for background to folks, you know, we all run under the FedEx DOT number, and then that having a DOT number carries with it a certain amount of regulatory compliance requirements for which you regularly get audited. And we hear it all the time about when we hear from FedEx about their CSA scores and how they target certain improvement initiatives. One of the things that you have to be able to do as a DOT number holder is you have to be able to produce hours of service information instantaneously upon request from an auditor. And the way FedEx is doing this is historically they used to use Lytics. Right now they're using PeopleNet to aggregate PeopleNet, Trimble, and OmniTrax information in a format in which they can try to comply with that requirement from the federal government. And by all accounts, it doesn't work very well at all. And so clearly, as part of this Drive initiative, one of the ways that they can improve their CSA performance, look, there's a real reason why they moved away from the FedEx ground number to the FedEx number, right? On the DOT number. The DOT number on the FedEx side was much cleaner. So they were working from behind the power curve on the FedEx ground side for sure. But they have to do better at complying with these hours of service requests. Report requests from the federal government, and I'm sure that's going to be a part of the Drive initiative. If they ever get control of that, which they do not have good control of it now, then I can see in a situation in which they would dispense with the need to do IVMRs. And Alex is absolutely right. Most of the problems that we have with IFTA are related to data entry errors when the IVMRs are put in the system. Thanks, Alex.
No problem. Okay, so next slide, key contractual provisions. Okay, so back to our discussion earlier. So these are where certain locations where FedEx has enhanced the termination and breach clauses in the TSPA. So in 12.3, TSPs agree that if we are in debt greater than $25,000 in the aggregate, so this constitutes a material breach of this agreement. So if you ever get a collection notice, or if you ever decide that you don't pay a bill for some reason and it's in excess of $25,000, and FedEx finds about this, you're in breach of the contract, and they have their right to immediately terminate your contract. So what does this mean? Pay your bills on time. Section 15.2C, termination rights. Here, either party, either FedEx or you as the TSP, has the right to terminate the agreement if either party becomes insolvent, enters receivership, or enters bankruptcy proceedings, or if a judgment of insolvency or bankruptcy is levied against them by a court. So you have the right to terminate your agreement with FedEx if they ever enter into bankruptcy or insolvency, just like FedEx has the right to terminate their agreement with you if you ever declare bankruptcy or go insolvent or have the court adjudicate that you're in such a status. Section 15.3, the breach and cure period. Okay, any breach of this agreement by either party that is not cured to the other party's satisfaction within 7 days of written notice, and this is referring to these breach and termination clauses specifically, warrants immediate termination of this agreement upon notice by the terminating party. So if we are insolvent for $25,000, if FedEx finds about it, they will give you a notice. You have 7 days to clear that debt. If you do not, then FedEx reserves the right to terminate your agreement. And then you can terminate this agreement immediately if and only if you're making false statements of fact or falsifying DOT-related documents. Okay, DOT-related documents is very, very important. Understand that hours of service and the logs that you submit to FedEx are considered DOT-related documents. So if you or your employees is accused of falsifying on purpose those DOT documents, you can have your contract terminated immediately. So pay special attention and make sure that you're following hours of service rules correctly and that you're applying them correctly. It's really, really important. FedEx takes this very, very seriously. I will not go into details, but I've seen them and heard of them in the past terminating agreements because they found a contractor or they found employees falsifying hours of service logs.
Yeah, that is an extremely important point. People ask me all the time, investors looking to get into business, hey, how can you lose your contract at FedEx? And I said, there's two primary ways they could take your contract on the spot. The first one is if you lie about anything, right? And then now they've written into the contract in this manner. And when I say you, that remember when we started this, Alex made a point to identify the fact that you or any of your employees is the same as the entity. Okay, so if one of your BCs or somebody else in your organization lies to FedEx, it comes back on the entity. And I've seen guys lose their contract because their BCs were lying to FedEx about certain things, and the owner wasn't paying attention. He was one of the remote owners living in Florida, letting somebody else run his business. And the next thing he knows, he didn't have a business. FedEx took it. So you have to be in charge of those things. And then say is the other thing that they will absolutely take your contract on the spot if you are unable to meet if you get a letter to cure or order to cure, you better have a good plan and you better be able to execute that plan or your contract is at risk. And so these are the whenever you talk about contracts, look, in experience, contracts typically don't matter until something goes sideways. And here's what it looks like when it goes sideways. And I need Alex pointing out, it's extremely important that you know about these things.
Okay, the assignment and transfer process. Okay, so pretty much everybody understands how the assignment and transfer process works. This is a clarification specifically between two contractors who already are operating under an agreement between FedEx. Okay, so if you don't know, before, a long time ago in a galaxy far, farther away, Tim owned and operated a company called Oscar Mike Transportation, Oscar Mike Logistics. What was it, Tim? Okay, so just Oscar Mike. So so if Oscar Mike and Alpha Kilo wanted to enter into a transaction where Oscar Mike transferred runs from Oscar Mike to Alpha Kilo, or if we did an agreement, or we did some kind of joint venture where we're operating together and we're merging our operations, this is explaining that FedEx's consent to an assignment or transfer is contingent on both Alpha Kilo and Oscar Mike agreeing to the terms of this transaction. So FedEx cannot force Oscar Mike to sell runs to me, and FedEx cannot force Alpha Kilo to buy the runs. Oscar Mike has to agree, and Alpha Kilo has to agree to enter into this transaction. Okay, this is typically executed through a BD030 or BD30, whatever you want to call, and that's what FedEx uses to facilitate the transfer runs between two contractors who have signed a TSPA with FedEx. This is also the document you need between a contractor and a potentially new contractor. You have to submit the BD030, but this is specifically talking about how and clarifying what responsibilities FedEx has and what responsibilities each TSP has when we want to transfer runs between them. Okay, so upcoming changes, slide 26. Upcoming changes to the unassigned run process, assignment process. So, as many of you are aware, Paul and Garth made an announcement back in February/March timeframe that there's going to be the ability to pause your runs on the unassigned run rotation. Okay, so this Schedule A of the TS section 2.3 talks about the new UR run assignment process, and what's going to happen when we have either the 5-day schedule or if you decide to pause your contract. Okay, so this lays out the key terms. Unfortunately, I don't own any hub or terminal that actually is operating on a 5 or 6 day schedule. All 9 runs continue to operate under a 7-day schedule. But this is the language that FedEx is utilizing to make this process possible. And then it also gives key terms and clarification to what happens if a tractor is paused. So when a tractor is paused, it's an agreement and it's a signed document between the contractor and the senior line haul manager that agree that a vehicle 159467 will be paused on September 17th, and that it will be unpaused on December 17th for 3 months. During this process, a run cannot be offered to me on the unassigned run rotation for the spot held by tractor 159467. I will not be assessed any declines. FedEx will not award me any points, but it does not preclude you from selling that run to another contractor. So if I have a tractor that is paused on the unassigned run rotation, I have the ability to transfer or sell that paused unassigned run to Tim at Oscar Mike. Additionally, if FedEx for some reason decides to post a growth opportunity in one of my hubs, I can use that tractor and the points associated with it to bid on a run. It does not preclude you from either of those things. So while the language does look, it's kind of nebulous, saying about assignment and posting and all those different kind of terms, those terms and that language specifically is talking about assigning runs during the day as the rotation occurs. And so during that process, when you have a vehicle pause, you don't get offered any runs to run, and you don't get any points to collect, and you don't get hit with any declines. I'm sure we're going to get more questions on this, and we can go back to it. But I wanted to make sure that you had an understanding about the language there. Okay, some additional updates in Schedule A 11.5. The availability threshold has been moved back to 90% for URRs. It used to be 85%. This was a change that made during the pandemic, and this is just bringing it back to where it was prior to the pandemic. Schedule C, Section 5, fuel mile settlement. The miles per gallon reimbursement has been updated. It's changing the fuel efficiency from 6.8966 miles to the gallon to 6.993 miles a gallon. Depending on the mileage of your truck and how fuel efficient it is, it's about a -1 to 1.4 cents per mile. Drop and hook has been changed dramatically. For a 53, it's been changed to $12.25. That's an increase of 50 cents. For a set of pups, it's been increased to $21.25. This is an increase of $1.25. And for a set of triples, it's been increased to $29, which is an increase of $2. And then FedEx has added some teeth to toll transponders. TSPs now have 7 days to return toll transponders when requested. So if you have a best pass and you want to move to the the new pass or whatever they're switching the passes to, if FedEx switches your passes out and gives you a new pass, you have 7 days to pay to turn the old pass in. Otherwise, FedEx reserves the right to charge you for the cost of that pass or that transponder. And then this was already in effect back in the old TSPA, but they added some language to it and just made it clarified it a little bit. The cost of base plates outside of the annual charge that occurs in February. So if you bring in on a new tractor today, the cost of those base plates will be charged back to your settlement in 16 equal weekly installments commencing 4 weeks after the equipment for which the base plates are obtained has been registered. So if I bring a new piece of equipment on and it gets approved as a tractor today on Tuesday, September 17th, 4 weeks from now, FedEx is going to start hitting me for base plate fees, and they will take them out in 16 equal weekly installments.
Alex, could you just take 2 quick minutes and explain I know we don't have the chart, but it's an updated, it's updated in Schedule C on the fuel mileage supplement. The fact that there's a fuel surcharge component of the base VMR, yes, and that is additive per mile to the fuel surcharge that you see listed for the run that you're on.
Okay, so if you want to think about this, and we'll actually see how good of a junior high math teacher I am. Okay, so the function for determining fuel efficiency and understanding where your fuel reimbursement is versus the number of gallons you buy or the cost of the fuel is can simply be put into Y equals MX plus P. So if you remember your tables, your graph, you have the Y axis and then you have the X axis. Okay, so the X axis is the cost of your gas. Okay, so it starts at, I think the lowest point on the table is $2.55, and the highest point on the table is something like $7.25. So that's your X axis. Okay, on the Y axis you have the per mile rate that you get reimbursed at. So when it's at $2.55, you're getting reimbursed at 0.1952 cents per gallon. Okay. So what you do is you're going to take rise over run. You're going to take 2 points on the graph. And so, for example, you can take 2.55 and 0.1952 and 4.25 and 0.4383, and you can get your rise over your run, and that equals they'll give you the points to understand what is y equals mx plus b. And then you understand that when you graph this, you'll see that the intercept of the y-axis is not actually at 0. So where the graph actually starts out at is 0.952 cents per mile. And so that's the embedded amount of the embedded fuel reimbursement rate in the VMR. And if I confused anybody, I can try to draw you a nice little picture on a piece of paper and demonstrate it to you. I unfortunately do not have a blackboard in here. If you went to one of the military academies, they always used to tell you to take boards, and I could probably try to solve this equation for you.
But the key point is that a lot of folks do not understand that the base VMR rate includes fuel surcharge, so that anything below a certain price of fuel, the fuel surcharge is part of the base VMR. And then what you see on the identified on the settlement every week is additive to that number. So right now, the new number is, based on calculations by Alex that we double checked with John Holdy, is 0.1764 cents per mile. And so then you would add that to what you see listed for fuel surcharge on each trip. And that's what you're getting paid per mile for fuel. And then when you add that up and you divide by that average cost of fuel, you will see it comes out to right at seven miles per gallon. So that's how it all comes together. So it's within a couple hundreds now that the target miles per gallon that's a part of the fuel surcharge calculation. You can just think of it as 7 miles per gallon.
And this is something that you really should pay attention to. So this is a fun. The way that this comes up with this is that take the average number of miles each of their trucks travels and divides the number of gallons that each of those trucks purchases. And that's how they come up with 7 being is the fleet fuel average fuel efficiency. And that's what they're reimbursing us at. Okay. So you can point to all those team drivers and team truckers and team companies who replace their trucks every 2 years. The reason why the fuel efficiency keeps going up. But also it's a benefit from the OEM standpoint. I mean, if you think about it, one of the reasons why the OEMs have been justifying higher and higher costs per truck because they're saying we're getting savings on the fuel efficiency. What frustrates me with FedEx is that they're saying that they're reimbursing us at the level that the average fleet gets. The problem though is that we're getting penalized on both sides. We're paying more for the trucks because the OEMs are saying that to achieve better efficiency, they need to spend more money on the engines, and that's why we spend more money on the truck. At the same time, FedEx is really not allowing us to take the benefit for it. So the cost of our truck, we're not getting the opportunity to take advantage of the improved fuel efficiency. I hope I made sense to everybody.
Yeah, and that was also I don't know if it was a planned benefit, but certainly a side benefit of forcing everyone to go to FCAM, because essentially the fleet got younger when that happened, which means it got more fuel efficient. There's nothing in this contract that works in a contractor's favor. This is why it's important that you understand it. FedEx pays folks a lot of money to make sure they're taking care of FedEx. They're not taking care of you. So when they make these changes, I calculated last year that the change in the fuel surcharge was a 9-figure positive to the FedEx bottom line. When they calculate that they're going to save $6 billion, you can believe that they figured out where they're going to try to get that $6 billion, right? And they're counting on improvement in fleet miles per gallon as part of that. So it's incumbent upon how that impacts your business and what's going to happen next year if they change it, or year after if they change it to 7.2 miles per gallon or 7.4, 3 years, 4 years from now. You need to understand how that impacts your fleet, and you need to prepare now. And I've talked to many of you on this call, so you already know we talk about this a lot. But what Alex is saying, this is absolutely critical to profitability. If you don't understand the fuel surcharge and manage fleet in view of it, this is you will be supremely challenged to be profitable as a FedEx contractor. You have to understand fuel and manage it to the best of your ability.
Okay, offenses and disqualifications. Okay, so this is just clarifying Schedule E and some of the language here. Understand that Schedule E refers to safe operations. So this is the do's and do nots. If your driver does one of these things, he's going to be disqualified. And if you don't disqualify that driver yourself, FedEx will disqualify them. If a disqualified driver drives for you, then you as a contractor are going to be disqualified. So keep an eye on Schedule E. For example, what I do every year is I take Schedule E and I take all the disqualifying language in it and I put it into my standard operating procedures and into my employee handbook. So all my drivers understand that these are the minimum requirements of what you have to do in order to remain an employee of Alpha Kilo. Now, there are other things that I require them to do, but at a minimum, they cannot do any of these major or minor offenses that gets them disqualified. And if they become disqualified, I make it very clear in my employee handbook that they are no longer an employee of Alpha Kilo in those situations, because I don't have any jobs for them if they're disqualified for driving for FedEx. So Schedule E, Section 3.3, this is a change. They removed the language saying that a driver is no longer disqualified if they cause a serious bodily harm in excess of 100K. I don't know why they pulled that language out. Maybe they felt that it was already clarified. It was already clear somewhere else. This is actually a benefit for contractors. So if you have a driver who does not cause a fatality, but causes enough serious bodily harm it causes over $100,000 worth of damages, your driver is not disqualified, but he's probably disqualified for other areas in the contract. And then Schedule E is very clear in Section 3.3, Part 7, that if you cause a fatality through the operation of a commercial motor vehicle, you are not allowed to provide service to FedEx. Okay. Additionally, in Schedule E, Section 5, it used to just say, you can't do drugs and you can't sell drugs and you can't distribute drugs. Now the language has been clarified to say you cannot have the possession, the distribution of controlled substances, and it's much more robust in that language. I don't know why, but I thought the language was pretty clear before, but now it's adding a couple more legalese terms to clarify that drivers will be disqualified if they're caught possessing, distributing, or using controlled substances. Next slide, please. Safety and technology compliance. Schedule E, Section 8.5A and C. These are changes that expand or strengthen the requirements the TSP has of responding in writing for specific issues. So safety technology. Upon request, hey, Tim, can you ask Ali to move to the next slide? Slide 19. Yes. Upon request, TSPs will have to certify in writing and or demonstrate the compliance as requested by Federal Express Corporation from time to time. So if for some reason FedEx thinks they're operating vehicles without vetter devices, you will have to certify in writing compliance with that standard, or you might have to allow your vehicles to be inspected. And then also TSPs agree to authorize our vendor providers. So think of Motive, Lytix, Ground Cloud, Velociter, to furnish to Federal Express Corporation to each TSP's vendor generated data that is de-identified and aggregated with multiple sources. So what does this mean? It means that they're going to take your data and they're going to take your videos of drivers and they're going to blur out the face. And they're going to blur out anything that says Alpha Kilo or Oscar Mike. And then they're going to take it and they're going to put it together with a couple hundred other contractors and provide that information to FedEx, so that FedEx does not have the ability to say, oh, we're seeing that Alpha Kilo over and over again is driving without seatbelts. They're just going to know that there are contractors out there driving without seatbelts. So it's very important to understand FedEx is requiring, and we agree to provide through our vendor providers this information to FedEx. It has to be de-identified. So that means the facial features and any identifying marks of the company operating that vehicle has to be de-identified and blurred out, and then aggregated with multiple other contractors. Okay, indemnification. This is really, really important. This is the biggest thing in the entire contract, and it's really important to understand. Okay, in Schedule G of section 2.32D, okay, we as contractors now agree that FedEx does not provide indemnification for the first $35,000 of rear end collisions. So in the past, if you had FCAM and if you had a qualified safety training program and that your driver had completed that qualified safety training program and you were able to provide better video of the incident, you were just liable up to $2,000. So whether you got into a multi-million-dollar pileup or you just had a fender bender where you knocked over a lamppost or a mailbox, you were only subject up to the first $2,000. Now, in the event that it's a rear end collision, whether or not you have FCAM, whether or not you have a qualified safety training program, or are able to provide better videos, you are on the hook for the first $35,000. So at a minimum, you need to have a safety net in your bank account or in your savings account of a minimum $35,000 so that you can afford to pay FedEx in the event that you have a rear end collision.
If I might add, that's $35,000 per incident. So you need to have as much as $35,000 for however many accidents you plan to have this year. You need to have that in your rainy day fund. This is a huge hit. Now, let me ask Alex, the finance guru, this question. Alex, have you talked to any insurers, or do you think it would be possible that there could be a insurance package created that contractors could buy to help with this?
No, none of the large insurance carriers would provide insurance in the event of this situation because as contractors, we operate under FedEx's DOT authority. And so FedEx is actually responsible for providing trucking liability insurance. And so no third-party insurer, think of Great West or Transwest or Northern Pacific or Great Pacific or any of the other big insurance providers, is going to subject themselves to the whims of FedEx and determining when this is triggered or not. So this is something that we are not going to be able to get indemnification for. If you remember, the original version of the contract had some language in it that contractors managed to get removed from the contract. And that was because the way the language was stated would have prevented banks from lending to us. This language kind of snuck through because in the forums, it wasn't very clear what it just said that Schedule G, Section 2.32 is moved from C to D, but didn't clarify what C or D was. C was the $1,000 indemnification, and D was the $35,000 indemnification. It didn't even actually say what rear end collisions were. It just said that Schedule G, Section 2.32 was moving from C to D. So it's kind of frustrating on my end that I didn't catch this earlier and make a stink of it. It's something I'm going to ask FedEx about because it's literally putting the onus on contractors to make sure that OEM installed equipment works as advertised. To me, it seems like FedEx should be going after the OEMs. They're the ones that required us to put forward collision avoidance and mitigation systems in each and every one of our trucks. If they want to request that I certify in writing that I have FCAM in every one of my trucks and that they work, I will. But I shouldn't be responsible if there's a software malfunction. That should be the OEM's responsibility. And FedEx, as the DOT carrier and the insurance provider, should be able to go after that OEM instead of me.
Yeah, this is hard to put into words in terms of how big a deal this is. This is a 17x increase in your liability, and there's no rules around it. FedEx could simply say every rear-end collision, the first $35,000 of expenses are going to be responsibility of the contractors. They could do that. There's no guidelines here that tells you that. In theory, the FCAM should be able to stop your truck in most situations, not all situations. But this is Alex has identified really the only thing you can do other than, increase following distance and maintain that following distance by huge margins, is to ensure that your FCAM is properly functioning. And that's not an easy thing to check. Right. It's not like you can take the truck out there and drive it and see if it's actually going to stop in a contingent situation. You just have to do a computer evaluation. So there's a lot to go here. So because, for instance, if I was in a situation in which assessed me $35,000 for something that you could potentially say was marginally not a rear end collision, then it's going to be incumbent on me to fight that, which means that the $35,000 is now going to also include potential legal fees from my side, unless I win my confrontation with FedEx in that regard, which is not going to be a lawsuit. It would go through arbitration, and it will take forever, right? So, I mean, this is a major deal. We could do a whole hour on what a big deal this is, but I appreciate Alex snuffing this out and bringing it to your attention. If you didn't hear anything else today, I hope you heard that.
Yeah, in general, I thought the contract was very fair. There have been other years where I thought I didn't like the language. I didn't like the changes. I didn't think there was anything really that was earth-shattering in the contract this year. I thought the settlement increases were actually really reasonable for me in my areas of operation. I thought that, they actually slightly exceeded inflation in certain areas and covered the cost of tires and new truck prices in other areas. So I was very happy with the contract. It was just this language in Schedule G that bothers me. And I plan to ask and talk to senior FedEx management about this in Orlando, and I guess it's only 2 weeks away. So in 2 weeks, I plan to talk to senior management about this language because I think it goes a little bit too far, because this is a liability that we cannot get insurance for. And our job as business owners is to manage our risk and provide effective and efficient service to FedEx.
Yeah, this is a really big deal, because what Alex just said is that in any business, forget that you're in FedEx, I like to say a lot, is that there's nothing special about the FedEx business. It's a business like all other businesses. And typically in all other businesses, you identify your risk, you identify how much you can handle in terms of cash outlays for potential risks assessments, and then you insure the rest, right? There is omissions and emissions insurance out there, E&O insurance. There's all kinds of officer insurance for the officers of companies. There's all kinds of insurances out there. But that's the reason I asked this question. You are now exposed to a $35,000 uninsurable risk. And that's a game changer in many respects. $2,000, no one feels sorry for you. That's not a bad risk, but $35,000 is a big number, and it could put companies out of business. I mean, $35,000 is a lot of money, and you would probably if you just make $100 a run, okay, just say that, and you may not be making $100 a run, but if you make $100 per run profit, you would have to do 350 runs to save $35,000 and not take 1 penny of profit. So if you've got 10 runs, you would have to run for 5 weeks with no profit just to save enough money to be able to pay that potential exposure. In other words, you would be self-insuring that risk by going down that program. So this is a really big deal. I look forward to this conversation. I won't be able to be in the room, Alex, so maybe you have to hit record on your phone when you roll this thing out on the table in the group session, because I know you will.
I would say for all the contractors on the phone or on the call with us, one thing that you should be requiring, this is something I require all my managers to do. One is when they walk the line, and I require my managers to, at a minimum, walk the line weekly. And they check, one of the things that they are required to check on every single one of our tractors is make sure all the tires are inflated up to 120 PSI. And 2, make sure that all the F-cams are plugged in. Okay. Additionally, they are required to make sure that there is no aluminum foil in between the radar and its case. Okay. Those 2 things, if it's unplugged, or if there's aluminum foil in and around the radar, will prevent the F-cam from working. Why do drivers do this? Is because they hate the beeping that trucks make when you're tailgating a vehicle in front of you. Or they don't like the fact that the F-cam will slam on the brakes if you are encroaching too close to a vehicle and that vehicle starts slowing down. So those are 2 things that I require my drivers to do. The other thing is that whenever if we have a code for radar, we immediately take that vehicle into the shop to go get assessed. Why is the truck throwing a radar code? A lot of times it just means that it has water in the connection, but sometimes it actually means that the radar is inoperable and you need to replace the radar. I've probably, since we've done F-cam integration back in 2019, 2020, I've probably replaced 15 or 16 radars. And knock on wood, I've never had a rear end collision. So those are some things that my guys do. I really appreciate everybody joining us on this call. I know that we ran for an hour and 1 minute. I'm sorry.
Well, we do have one question, Alex. I'd like your thoughts on.
But I have time. I have time. Tim, if you have time, I have time to go through some of these questions if you want.
Yeah, we have a question that I haven't answered yet to get your thoughts on it. So, given these changes that you just talked about in the contract, is this in your opinion, and we get this question every year, but is this the first step to push contractors into getting?
So your question was, is this the first step to requiring contractors to get their own DOT authority?
Yeah,
no,
that's
I
the
don't.
Question from the floor.
I don't expect FedEx to require contractors to get their DOT authority. FedEx saves too much money by requiring us to operate under their own DOT authority. Remember that FedEx is self-insured, and they pay lower costs to be self-insured than if they had gone out and bought insurance from a Transwest or a Great West. So what they're going to do is they're going to implement a lot of processes and procedures to make us as TSPs safer and better operators in order to drive down their self-insurance costs. But I don't ever see FedEx requiring us to get our own DOT authority. Now, what can I see us doing? I could see them doing our IFTA for us, or getting rid of IFTA. I could see them requiring us to go get our own base plates. But realistically, the base plate thing is kind of, I think FedEx actually doesn't mind doing base plates. IFTA, I think, is a pain in the butt for them. And I think they would love to look at some way to offloading that back to contractors. There have been times during the 40 years, we're almost approaching 40 years that FedEx has owned the line haul side of the business. that it has required contractors to do their own IFTA. We happen to be in a period right now where for about 10 or 12 years they've done IFTA for us, but I can see them going back and reversing it. When I look at the contract and I look at the terms, they are preparing us to grow incrementally on the shorter side of the business. So on the spot market and on the Federal Express Corporation side, I could see line haul contractors being required to provide TSA drivers to go take trailers directly onto an airport ramp and drop trailers that can go onto an air cargo trailers to go into airplanes and to pull air cargo trailers back to the TSPs. So that's the one thing I think I'm seeing is the potential for new hubs or stations to be opened up and specifically oriented towards what they call ramps in the FedEx space. So they have hubs, they have terminals, they have rail yards. So, I don't know if anybody else, but I run to a lot of rail yards on a regular basis. But one thing that I don't do right now is I don't run to any ramps. And those are airports where FedEx branded aircraft fly in and deliver, very expensive, very refrigerated, very high dollar items into the FedEx network. Think of your pharmaceuticals, think of military or DoD supplies, think of high value products that need to be controlled in the process. Those all go through the ramps or through the airports. And I could see FedEx contractors in the next 2 to 3 years having to provide drivers who are TSA certified that can go into the airports, grab those specific trailers and take them back to FedEx hubs and terminals.
Yeah, my personal opinion is in terms of on authority. As I say all the time when we talk about how to understand corporate behavior, all entities act in their own best interest. And Alex gave you one example of what's in FedEx interest. That's a key component. The other thing that they have with this network is they have essentially, they know exactly how much power they have available to them every single day. And they can plan for that, right? So what they have a specifically committed resource available to them to execute their plans. And if everybody was running under their own authority, that would not be the case, and that would introduce some additional risk into the network. So I agree with Alex. I don't think it's in FedEx's interest to have everybody run under their own authority, because then that just makes everybody a purchase carrier, and FedEx loses the amount of control that they have right now. Alex mentioned going to ramps. I think there's going to be more of that for sure. Right now, FedEx Express line haul's been doing all that. Yeah, but we just talked about the fact that if you have rear end collisions, you're exposed to $35,000. Well, spots and ramps are and rail yards and lots of times the ports are really executed in high traffic areas, very dense traffic. And your exposure to potential rear end collisions is dramatically higher in those regards. And your safety score is not adjusted for anything that happens in the city environment. And so you got to weigh all those things and make sure you do some of the mitigation steps that Alex talked about.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example, I've actually pulled my first Federal Express Corporation load last week. It was a very different process for me. They're not set up yet and they're not integrated into MTA. So I had to go back through the old process of getting a paper dispatch. But I was directed to go to a specific Federal Express Corporation facility and grab a load and got paper dispatch and then took it to another Federal Express Corporation facility. It worked pretty smoothly. I'll let you know next week if I get paid on it correctly, but it was my first time. So it was kind of it was kind of exciting, and my drivers were excited about. I mean, there were two old schoolers who've been around for 25 years. They have 700 series numbers, and so they were kind of excited about being the first ones within Alpha Kilo's authority of pulling loads for a Federal Express Corporation.
Awesome. This change on base plates to let it be paid over 14 weeks instead of taking out of 2 consecutive payments is a step to help contractors, because previously, you would lose essentially everything for a couple of weeks. And now they're spreading that out over 14 weeks. And again, Indiana is one of the lowest cost states in the country in which to get your base plates. And it certainly simplifies things for FedEx. They prefer it if you get their base plates. It's just a lot easier for them. So we appreciate Alex being here. It appears that we don't have any other questions in the queue. Just a reminder of the webinar schedule. So the fall webinar series, key strategies to maximize ROI. So we've had a contract conversation today so that you can understand the foundation upon which you'll be running your business over the next 12 months so that you can plan accordingly to manage your profitability. Next week, we're going to talk to Matt Woodruff. Matt is a good friend of Alex, and he's the top transportation analyst on Wall Street, FedEx in particular, as well as UPS and others. And he'll be back with us to talk about the FedEx earnings that come out on Thursday. So if you recall, the last earnings that we talked about in this webinar series were related to the end of the fiscal year announcements. And FedEx announced, increased revenue, increased profits on declining revenue. That was an interesting conversation. So we're going to see what they say on Thursday, and then we're going to cover that in detail on Tuesday with Matt Woodruff. That'll be next Tuesday, September 24th. The week after that, we'll all be, hopefully, most of us I know the entire My Ground Force team will be in the expo at the FedEx Summit, Ford Summit in Orlando. We look forward to seeing many of you there. And then we'll pick up with this webinar series again on October 8th. And we'll be talking with Motive execs on how to leverage MV+AI to improve your profitability. And we're going to be announcing some major combinations with Motive during the FedEx Summit in a couple weeks. And then we'll proceed each week on Tuesday afternoons at 2 o'clock. Some of our guests, so we're going to focus on things that you don't hear a lot. If you look at Facebook or you look at other webcasts or podcasts out there, everybody's focusing on how to find drivers, how to find trucks, how to grow runs, all these kinds of things. That it's been done to death, and it's continuing to be done to death. And we don't like to do that here. So we're focused on how to help you be profitable. Alex has given you a lot of really good insight today. We'll hear what to expect from FedEx next week. And then we're going to start talking about how to leverage things to your advantage. We're going to talk to Motive. We're going to talk to Southern Tire Mart about how can you buy tires. And you're going to hear about some things that I've worked with them on that helps you save a lot of money on tires. Then we're going to talk to PSI International about how to leverage technology to monitor your tire pressure and temperature in the cloud to reduce your overall expenses associated with fuel and tires by as much as 30%. We're going to talk to some experts on like Norb Kohler on how to get into the business and how to get in what Tim calls the right way. I coach guys a lot. I do a lot of consulting like Alex does, and I talk to a lot of guys getting into this business. And my number one coaching to them is you got to get in the right way, which means you get the right price point with a great operational plan to execute the business that you buy. So many people buy a business and haven't even read the contract. I did see today that we have a higher percentage that have read the contract. Yay, I'm having a marginal impact at least on this audience. And then we're going to talk about if you're tired, how can you get out and not pay taxes? There are a couple strategies you can employ. We're going to talk to a FedEx expert on that sometime in November. We're really trying to bring to you some information that you don't have or typically haven't had, where we focus on how to help you be profitable in this webinar series. So we really appreciate your attention. Some of the questions that we asked today around compliance, My Ground Force customers are compliant with the contract. We have processes for all those things that FedEx implies or specifies in the contract. Alex talked about some of those today. My Ground Force customers have active programs to be compliant with the contract. So if you need help with that, give us a call. Anything else, I'm sure we can offer some services that will be of assistance. So we'll be back next Tuesday at 2 p.m. with Matt Woodruff. Thanks again to Alex Frum. You guys take care.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate you, brother.
No, it was awesome. Really enjoy the opportunity. And I'm glad that everybody else enjoyed it as well. If anybody has follow-up questions, just let me know, okay?
Yeah, man. Take care.
Take care.
See you in a couple weeks.
Sounds good. Can't wait.